Let's move on to main topic number 1. And our first main topic today gets sent in to us by Martin Fish, who writes, "Hey, John. So there were reports going around that said there was a test screening here. This is again. That said there was a test screening for Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker and that it was a disaster and that people walked out. But now I just saw that J.J. Abrams has confirmed there hasn't been any test screenings, so I'm confused. Where did these reports come from?" All right, thanks a lot for the question, Martin. And yes, there has been, and I've been getting emails from people for well over a week saying, "Oh my gosh, John, did you hear that at the test screening of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker was a disaster and everybody hated it and people got up and walked out of the thing and George, they had to get George Lucas to do a cut of the movie and all this kind of stuff." To which I've been refuting, that's not how test screenings work, but we'll get to that in a second. To now add into this whole discussion, J.J. Abrams was actually finally directly asked about this. And J.J. Abrams basically said this, which should put it to bed, but it won't, but it should, but it won't. But J.J. Abrams came out, the director of the new film came out and said the following. He said, no test audiences have seen the movie. Of course, I've shown it at a friends and family screening, but we've never done like test screenings. That's from J.J. Abrams. As a matter of fact, John Boyega has confirmed that the cast hasn't even seen the movie yet. I believe today is the day, if I'm not mistaken, I believe today is the day that the cast will actually get to see the movie. So the cast hasn't seen the movie yet and all that kind of stuff. So there's that. This brings up an interesting thing. Is that even if you remove JJ's statement, this whole rumor has been so utterly unbelievable that nobody should have bought into this rumor in the first place. And we're going to go into some reasons why. But I want to preface everything I'm going to say here by saying this. Just because this BS rumor about this test screening being a disaster, people walked out, just because that rumor was BS and not true, let me make something very, very, very clear. That doesn't mean this movie's good. Let's be clear about that. Just because this rumor isn't true doesn't mean the movie's good. Hell, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker could conceivably be the worst film of all time. I mean, I really like what J.J. Abrams did with The Force Awakens, so I doubt that, but this could be an unmitigated disaster of a movie. And whether this rumor was BS or not, it doesn't change the fact that this could still be an utter disaster of a movie. It could. The point, though, is we don't know. That's the point. It could be a disaster. It might not be a disaster. Could be really good. Could be really horrible. The point is we don't know. And this whole thing about there was a test screening and it was a disaster and people walked out. I've been telling you guys from the beginning, this was all complete BS. And I want us to go through this. And this is important. This is important, guys. Let's go through this. All right. There's a couple of things you need to keep in mind about this rumor and some of the responses we've been hearing from people to JJ confirming, look, no such test screening ever even happened. Let's take a look at these things. Okay. Number one, and you would be forgiven if you don't live anywhere near Los Angeles and you know nothing about the movie business and you have no idea how any of this stuff works. You would be forgiven if you first heard this rumor and maybe thought there could be some credibility to it because you don't know how these things work. But here's the thing. Number one, especially with Disney, test screenings are like scientific experiments. Scientific experiments are done in controlled environments. Disney takes that approach with their test screenings. They are controlled environments. They screen the people who are going to be sitting in there and watching it. They know each one of them. I mean, they don't know them in advance, but they screen each participant. They get them in there. They sign their NDAs. They have security in the room with them, and you watch the whole movie, and then there's a discussion about the movie as the studio gets some thoughts or the distributor gets some thoughts from the audience on the film. You can't get up and walk out. Anybody who knows anything about test screenings, and again, you'd be forgiven if you didn't know this, so that's perfectly fine. But anybody who knows anything about test screenings, and there are a lot of people who do, should have instantly known once they read the thing, people got up and walked out of the test screening. That's not how test screenings work. That's not how they work. Not legitimate test screenings of a thing. I'm not talking about fan events or whatever, but test screenings, that's not how they work. Like scientific experiments, these are controlled environments. And even before JJ came out and said that such test screenings never happened, everybody should have known that the rumor was BS just on that basis alone. But again, a lot of people could be forgiven if they just didn't know anything about test screenings and how they work and how they operate, particularly at Disney. So there's that. So we need to keep that in mind. That's number one. And by the way, as a part of controlled test screenings, not only do they screen all the people, they have all the viewers, everybody who's in that audience, they have all their information, and they all sign contracts, NDAs, that they cannot talk about such a thing or even reveal that most of the time that they were even there. That's not always the case, that last part, but sometimes it is. I have been to a test screening before as an observer. I wasn't part of the test group, but I was there as an observer and I had to sign an NDA that said I would never even reveal that I was there at X movie. I can't even talk about which movie it was. Anyway, this led to a few people then coming out and saying, in a response to JJ's thing, now which is built on top of all this, that he's confirmed there hasn't been a test screening. Now, some people have brought up to me in my Twitter feed and sent me emails saying, but John, there's some leaked pictures. Okay. And they had to have come from a test screening. No. And that's not true. Number one, you couldn't possibly get a picture from a test screening, not a legitimate test screening, because even at their premieres, which have tons of invited guests, you're not allowed to bring a phone into the theater. You have to walk through a metal detector, and then there's a security guard with the magic wand that wands you down. You have to take out your phone, and they put it in a cell phone blocking locked bag that only they can unlock at the end of the evening. You cannot bring cell phones or cameras or whatever into a test screening. And there are always security in these screenings who have I have no idea how these lenses work. They have these lenses. You guys have read articles about these. They have these lenses that will show them immediately if somebody has any kind of a camera device. And then you are beaten to death and thrown out into the streets. So we've always said on this show, and I've said this 1,000 times, it's not surprising that leaks from movies come out. What is surprising is that it doesn't happen more often. We live in a world now, and in a movie like Star Wars, where thousands of people work on it, and all these people have audio-visual global communication devices in their person. To me, it's a bigger surprise that more leaks don't happen. But they can happen at any one of 500 different points in the timeline, one of which is not an official Disney press screening. So there's that. Number 3. Another response that I've seen a lot of people say in response to J.J. Abrams saying that no such test screening was, but John, J.J. Abrams once said that Benedict Cumberbatch wasn't Khan. He's a liar. Therefore, he must be lying here. Oh, my word. Why did I just sound like Jabba's cousin from Clone Wars? I don't know. Anyway, listen, I've talked many, many times about the fact that J.J. Abrams said that Benedict Cumberbatch wasn't going to be Khan. But if you've got to be a special kind of imbecile, which, let's face it, we all are sometimes, including me. Sometimes mostly me. Anyway, to equate a director trying to hide a major spoiler from a movie of his coming out to anything else, like trying to draw a connective dot between a situation like that and a situation like this, is just asinine. Now, if J.J. Abrams were to come out and say, oh no, Hayden Christensen's not in this movie, then I would go, okay, I'll believe J.J. Abrams, but let's keep in mind he also did say at one point that Benedict Cumberbatch wasn't Khan, so this could be a little bit of misdirect of him trying to hide a spoiler from a movie again. I would be in complete agreement with that. I think you would be too. But to try to say there's some sort of, commonality between a director who, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, however long ago it was, saying that, no, one of the characters was not playing a secret character in the movie. One of the actors wasn't playing a secret character in the movie because he didn't want to reveal the spoiler. And this is just asinine. It's just asinine to do that. So let's put that to bed right there. Number 4 kind of goes back to the whole thing of point number 2, but you can't bring cell phones into screens. But John, leaked images. Yeah, there are some leaked images. There are. But again, there are 500 points of reference in the timeline from A to B where that couldn't happen. And we've seen it happen to other movies, and they didn't come from test screenings. So there's that. But number 5, and this is where we really got to talk here for a second. Number 5 is the George Lucas myth. You know how I said at number 1 that you could be forgiven if you go all the way up here this way, if you go right up here to number 1, that you could be forgiven if you know nothing about test screenings, Hollywood, how these things work and how they operate, what can happen at them and what doesn't happen at them. You can be totally forgiven if, okay, you didn't know any of that stuff and some of that seemed credible to you. That's fine. I get that. I do. But it's once we get down there to number 5, the George Lucas myth. This is the part of this whole test screening myth where anybody with any ounce of common sense should have immediately recoiled backwards and gone, okay, well, this story is bullshit. Because for those you didn't know, part and parcel, all packaged in with this same rumor about the test screenings disaster, people walked out, was also this little bit of information. That Star Wars actually did 3 cuts of the movie. One was JJ's, one was something else, I can't remember, Bob Iger's, and they brought in George Lucas to do a cut of the movie. Ladies and gentlemen, at that point, everybody should have just gone, I'm out. Yeah, because you may test screenings, I don't know how that work, blah, 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 blah. Oh, they got George Lucas to do a cut of the movie. At that point, everybody should have checked out. And I will tell you something else. All the websites and outlets that ran with this story, they're run by some pretty smart people. They knew that it was all BS. They knew George Lucas did not do a cut of the movie. We had Kyle Newman in here, director of the movie Fanboys. We had him in here and co-hosting Dark Side, Light Side with me this week. Kyle Newman is an infamous Last Jedi hater. I think it's fair to call Kyle that. He is a Last Jedi hater. Kyle despises The Last Jedi. Lifelong Star Wars fan, super knowledgeable about Star Wars. He and I, great, good friend, love talking Star Wars with him, but he is a 100% hater of The Last Jedi. Kyle also knows a lot of people at Lucasfilm. And, he talked a little bit about this thing about, the moment they say George Lucas did something on this, it completely wipes it all out. Here's an example. Follow me here. It's like I told you a story. It's like I'm starting to tell you a story. And it's a little bit unbelievable, but could be believable in a way. And then I throw in a detail of the story that makes it completely hogwash. Here's an example. I don't know. Let's take a movie I didn't like. What's a movie I didn't like? Wrinkle in Time. Okay. I didn't like Wrinkle in Time. You guys know that. I wanted to like it. I thought it looked really good. Turned out to be kind of rubbish. So there we go. And I talked about it on my show. Wrinkle in Time, not a good movie, blah, 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 blah. So imagine now I tell you a story that, you know what, guys? I got to tell you this story. The day after I told you all that Wrinkle in Time wasn't a very good movie, police came to my door and said, there's been a complaint against you, Mr. John Campea, that you are disparaging a movie and it's slander. You are committing slander against this movie and you can be in some legal trouble. Now, the moment I tell you that, most of you should be going, that doesn't sound very true. That doesn't sound like that could actually happen, but maybe it could. Maybe. So I'm telling you this story. And you're thinking, this sounds pretty unbelievable, but I guess there's a way it could be true. So I'm telling you, police came to my door and said, there have been complaints filed against you, Mr. Campea, because you were disparaging this movie online. You're giving slander to this movie online, and you could be facing some serious legal trouble for telling people that Wrinkle in Time isn't good. And then I tell you the next part of the story. And in the next part of the story, I go, but officer, who's complaining? And they said, well, the Disney Corporation is complaining it, but the one specific complainant is Mickey Mouse. And I said, really? Mickey Mouse complained? And they say, yes, he's right here. And then just like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, an animated Mickey Mouse came right out and goes, John, fuck you, ha ha, and gets the police to arrest me and take me away. Now, if you're hearing me tell that story, the first part of the story, you go, well, that doesn't sound like it makes sense, but maybe it could be true. The moment I tell you a Who Framed Roger Rabbit animated Mickey Mouse showed up at my door with the police and said, John, fuck you, ha ha, and they put handcuffs on me, at that point, if you have any common sense at all in your head, you're going to go, I'm out. You might have had me for a minute there with all the rest of the story, Campea, but the moment you telling me an animated Mickey Mouse showed up to your house to take you away, it's such hog, I'm out, and you're going to completely take my story and you're going to throw it away. You're going to throw it away. That's what you would do. And I can just see all, the people who, and listen, it's fair to love The Last Jedi. It's fair to hate The Last Jedi, all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the people who ran with this story, even they had to go, oh, wow, the test screening, and people walked out. Well, you can't really do that in a test screening, but maybe there's a way. Okay, good. People are hating The Last Jedi. They're saying that George Lucas, they did 3 cuts of the movie and George Lucas did one of the cuts of the movie. I can just see the people that hated The Last Jedi and want The Last Jedi. All of them, because they're smart. They're smart. They know that was BS. They all probably went, oh God, why did they have to put that last part in there? This was sounding so good. It was sounding so good for a while. And then they had to just go one step too far and throw in this BS that George Lucas did a cut of the movie. Oh God, why'd they have to throw that in there? Maybe we can just gloss over that part. Maybe we can just not talk about that part very much and make it seem more believable, maybe, I guess. Ha-ha! Anyway, so even without J.J. Abrams coming out and setting the record straight and like, look, no such test screening happened. I did a friends and family thing, but that's not a controlled test screening environment. Friends and family is not a controlled environment. We did a friends and family thing, but even without that, even without J.J. Abrams saying that, we all should have known none of this was true. It doesn't equal up. What was being presented does not equal up with the facts of how test screenings work and what happens as a result of them, and that an animated Mickey Mouse showed up to tell me to screw off and took me to jail. We all should have known this, and that should have been the end of it. What this reminds me of, and this is important to point out here because this is an ongoing theme. What this situation reminds me of, do you remember there was the big hate campaign against Captain Marvel? And if you watch Captain Marvel and didn't like it, hey, that's the subjectivity of film. Maybe you didn't like it. But before the movie even came out, or I should say once it came out, Captain Marvel opened, there was a big boycott Captain Marvel movement, and the movie opened to $150 million plus. So it had a fabulous opening weekend, went on to make over $1.1 billion at the box office. But there were some people so desperate to counter those facts with their own narrative. Do you remember this? Do you remember this? This picture started getting circulated around everybody that wanted Captain Marvel to fail. You remember this? Captain Marvel opening night, and it's totally empty, which is weird because online it said that it practically sold out. The movie started now and it's empty. Remember this? And everybody took these photos and ran with it as proof of an animated Mickey Mouse showing up at their house and arresting them as proof that Disney was actually buying their own tickets across America to make it look like they were selling out. Now, but then what happened with this picture? Well, a very smart guy by the name of Dan Murrell, you guys know Dan, very smart guy by the name of Dan Murrell, did a report on this whole thing. And he pointed out, this guy, where is he? Up there. This guy up here who put out this tweet that he was there opening night and took a picture of the theater. This guy, as you go through his Twitter, he was part of the boycott Captain Marvel movement. And as Dan pointed out in his thing, he even put out this tweet that Captain Marvel belongs in a kitchen. That's where she should be, making men's sandwiches and stuff like that, right? And he was a part of the boycott Captain Marvel movement and all that kind of stuff. And so Dan Murrell brings all this up with this picture. And Dan Murrell so accurately points out, he goes, so you're telling me that this guy who's a part of this whole F. Brie Larson, boycott Captain Marvel belongs in the kitchen. You're telling me he bought a ticket to opening night at the movies? Uh-huh. And we're trying to say that this guy is a reliable source of information when it comes to anything regarding Captain Marvel. And that's what this is when it comes to this whole test screening thing of Star Wars. It's another one of these guys putting out a story that has that is completely unbelievable in its own merits. But there are people who are already pre-invested in wanting to believe it and then propagate it. And then it gets propagated more, and then it gets propagated more. And then before you know it, I'm getting emails and tweets from everybody saying, John, did you hear there was a test screening of Star Wars? And they got George Lucas to do a cut. It was so disastrous. And people got up and walked out of a test screening and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Again, let me reemphasize this point because it's important to make. And I know we've gone on a lot, I know we've gone on at length about this topic, but I believe this is important about we as film fans developing some discernment about what is true and what is not. Because I think that, imagine that, I think that's important. Anyway, I do want to reemphasize again, though, that none of this means that this movie is going to be any good. This movie could be a disaster. But if it's a disaster, it doesn't justify nor give any credibility to these BS rumors. If the movie's fantastic, it doesn't justify or give any credibility to other rumors saying, I've seen the Rise of Skywalker already and it's the greatest movie of all time. BS. BS. This movie's going to be great or it's going to be horrible or it's going to be somewhere in the middle, but it'll have nothing to do with any of the BS reports that are coming out. But it raises an interesting question for me. One of the things, Rob and I talked about this a little bit on the show yesterday. And I've got to ask this question. There are movies I don't like, and there are movies that I like. There are franchises I have hope in, franchises I don't have a lot of hope in. What I've never understood, and Rob articulates this very well, is the desire to see failure. Let's take, for example, Transformers. You guys know that other than the first Transformers movie, which I like very much, I'm an unapologetic lover of the first Transformer, not the animated one, but the first Michael Bay Transformers movie. You guys know I like that one. Aside from that, prior to Bumblebee, all the other Transformers movies are absolute horseshit. They're absolutely terrible. Just unbelievable garbage. They're horrible, 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 horrible movies. Now, some people like them, and that's great. I celebrate that if you like them. I'm glad you got something out of the movie. I did not. So there's that. But what happened when the next Transformer movie, like after I saw Transformers 2 and it was a pile of dung, what did I do into Transformers 3? Did I go, no, I hate Michael Bay forever now, and I hope Transformers fails, and I hope it sucks? No, what did I do? I go, man, I hope the next one's good. And I went to go see the next one. And it was awful, and it sucked. So did I go into number 4 going, no, screw that, we're going to organize boycotts against Transformers? Well, I was like, no, I'm just going to hope it's good. I hope it's good. I'm going to cheer for it because I want it to be a good movie. and it was terrible again. It was absolutely terrible again. What I don't understand is how any film fan gets so jaded to the point that you start hoping for a movie to be bad, because weak-minded people, of which we can all be from time to time, and I know I can be too, but it's an indication that we are in a moment of being weak-minded when we feel like, I want the next movie to fail, because if the next movie is good, it undermines my opinion that the last movie was bad. And I want to tell people, no, it doesn't. If you hated The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker is great, that doesn't undermine or delegitimize your opinion that The Last Jedi was terrible, any more than if The Rise of Skywalker is a terrible movie, that somehow supports your opinion that The Last Jedi was a terrible movie. It's completely independent. So why don't we as film fans approach the next movie going, hey, I hope it's great. I hope it's great. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't be, maybe I'll like it, maybe I'll hate it, but going into it, I hope it's great. And you know what else? It's fine to go into, with a new movie coming out and going, you know what? Now, I didn't do this, but it would have been totally understandable. If I hated Transformers 2 and hated Transformers 3 and go, you know what? I don't think I'm going to go see Transformers 4. I watched 2 and I watched 3 and I hated them both. So I think I'm going to sit this one out. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can still hope that it's good. There's no point in hoping something will be bad. Anyway, that's just it. This whole issue brings up a lot of talking points and a lot of discussion points. Will Transformers, will Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker be the next, totally divisive prequels or The Last Jedi or whatever? Maybe. Yeah, it could be bad. As a matter of fact, I think there's a lot of ways this movie could go bad. But maybe it'll be great. Maybe I'll love it just as much as I did The Force Awakens or more. Who knows? The point is, right now, we don't know. Guys, follow the sources of information. Be critical when you hear information. See if they actually line up with facts or if it's just pure wish fulfillment, hate mongering about something. Look into this stuff because it's key and it's important. Whether the movie's any good, we'll find out in just 2 weeks, guys. We will find out in 2 weeks. Anyway, guys, what do you think about all that? Jump down in the comments section below and let me know your thoughts. All right.